Okay, first of all, my name is Rebecca, and I am an English teacher here at, I am based in Dublin at the moment. Um, so today's webinar is going to be about cultural competence and intercultural communication. So first of all, I would like to focus on the term intercultural. So I chose to focus on this word because I think it's really relevant to understand the meaning of it. The definition of intercultural is taking place between the cultures. So every time that in the classroom we have students coming from different part of the world, different countries, it's literally a class happening between the cultures. So I think it's important to point out that the teacher is a cross communicator. So the importance of the teacher in the classroom is relevant to mediate between the different cultures. Someone is saying that you can't really hear me. Let me see. Can you hear me, everyone? Yes? Okay. Thank you for the feedback. Thank you so much. I'm going to continue then. So I was saying the teacher is a cross-cultural communicator. So it's important to remember that we are in the middle of students and we are mediating among the different cultures. So it's important to understand that culture shapes students' beliefs, emotions, self-expressions, thoughts, and the way they move around the world. So this is not to intimidate any teachers, but it's important to be aware that culture plays a very important role in the student's life. So for a teacher, being culturally competent is really challenging, okay? It's not easy, but it's also gradual. It doesn't happen from one day to the other. And it's important to know how cultures differ in the classroom and how they respond to different situations. One student coming from a specific country might react in a very different way from a person coming from a different cultures. So let's focus now on the concept of multicultural awareness. So it's the ability to understand and appreciate the history, life experiences, and beliefs of diverse groups of people. So as a teacher, it's important to be aware of the different facets that different students coming from different backgrounds have. So why? Why is it important? And I will never stop to highlight the importance of multicultural awareness. First of all, it helps students with different backgrounds succeed. So if you acknowledge that they have different cultures, they will be more aware and they will succeed in their lives. Additionally, it encourages acceptance, adaptability, and it helps students to thrive in the future because in their future, they will face a diverse world, not only in education, but also in the working environment. Additionally, it helps disconnecting with cultural barriers. Every teacher has cultural barriers. Therefore, also students have cultural barriers. So it's important to be aware in order to stop these barriers to interfere in your class. And I think one of my favorite elements, one of the favorite reasons of why being multicultural aware is to install curiosity. The more you are aware, the more your students will become curious about each other's cultures. So I have made a list of examples of type of cultural diversity you can find in the classroom. First of all, ethnicity. People might come from different ethnic groups. People might be of different ages. For example, in my class, I have students from 16 years old to 50 years old. So it's important to acknowledge the difference not only in culture, but also in age. Religion can be another cultural diversity element that you must be aware of. Language, people coming from different backgrounds might speak different languages. Socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, and gender identity. But also, I think it's really important to understand that diversity is not only about ethnic groups, age, gender, or sexual or language, but I think it's important to understand students might be different in the way they acquire information. For example, I have students they need to visualize things, or I have students they need to have schemes on the board or on their notebooks. So the way they learn things, it makes them diverse. And you as a teacher needs to be very aware of these differences. Additionally, I think it's important to be aware of the way they solve problems. They might have different ways of problem solving skills. Another diverse situation you might encounter is the ways of expressing with nonverbal communication. Teachers must be aware of the way they express with facial expressions or their physicality. Another way that students might interact with each other and might be diverse is the ways of learning. Additionally, I think it's important to be aware of ways of identifying conflict. People coming from different backgrounds, they might perceive conflict in a very different way. So, you as a teacher, I encourage asking questions. So, if a person consider something a problem, always check in with the other students if they think that is a problem or not. As a last element, I think it's important to be aware that different students with different backgrounds perceive symbols in a very different way from one each other. So I will see if somebody has any questions. Please do interrupt me if you have questions. So, how to promote diversity in a multicultural environment in the classroom? First of all, I think it's important to include culturally responsive instructions. Always be aware that your students come from different backgrounds, so you must be understood from everyone. So your instructions must be clear and respectful for everyone. I think it's important as a teacher to foster inclusion and collaboration among students. So, for example, I always ask questions if I notice some of my students are not speaking, they might feel shy or they might feel excluded. I always double check if they are understanding and they feel okay with my instructions and my topics. Something I do, it's also try to understand the differences because my students are all different. So I want to focus individually and also I want to invest time and I show interest. So I always try to make sure they feel appreciated, they feel listened, and they feel seen. So how to acknowledge every student? I think it's important to, for example, assign each other's cultural research. If I have students coming from different countries, sometimes I assign each other's countries to research a specific point. It can be folklore, it can be a recipe, something that might interest them to discover something new. So, for example, another way of acknowledge every student, it might be to encourage understanding nuances. Every culture is full of nuances. So try to ask questions and let them person describe the nuances to one each other. Another way it's important to acknowledge every student is to expose concepts that goes outside the student's comfort zone. They might feel a little bit challenged, but I think it's important to challenge them to go outside their comfort zone. Obviously, going outside the comfort zone might feel a little bit uncomfortable. And always, as a teacher, I think it's important to remember they must feel safe. So if you feel they are not okay 100% doing a certain topic or discussing about a certain topic, do ask questions in order for them to feel safe. And as a final point, I think it's important to make sure to point out what's offensive and what might feel a cultural appropriation. So, for example, if um, a person wants to talk about their culture, their religion, or something that is important for them, always make sure it's not offensive for everyone else. Or if somebody feels offended, do talk about it, do encourage conversation about the topic. So, in this way, if you acknowledge every student, I think it's important for them because they will feel valued, they will feel seen, and therefore they will be comfortable opening up not only with the teacher, but I think it will be very useful for them to feel comfortable opening up with their peers. So if you, for example, as a teacher, suggest a group discussion, they wouldn't feel self-conscious, but they will feel very competent talking about the topic because you allowed that openness. So I want to start talking about cultural sensitivity because I think it's important to, as a teacher, be sensitive to everyone's cultures. So, for example, if you notice someone feels excluded or someone is not completely confident talking about their culture, be sensitive about it, ask questions, but do not impose yourself. Be sensitive in understanding where is the limit. Second of all, I think it's important to design lessons in which everyone can relate to and feel engaged. If you have people coming from a minority or countries that it's not very common to talk about it, design your lessons in which all of your students would identify themselves. They would find something that they could relate to. And I think it's important to encourage inclusion. So if you're talking about, for example, I'm based in Dublin, so I also include examples coming from the Irish background, the Irish culture. But encourage inclusion. Always ask if people coming from another European country, or they might come from Asia, South America, Northern America, Africa. So always ask questions, ask what they think about it, how they perceive the culture that of the country they live in. And as a final point, I think it's important to show respect. So, despite the differences that the students have of their culture or the ethnic group, the age, religion, sexual orientation, or gender, I think it's always important to show respect. Therefore, they will show respect among themselves. So, another important issue that sometimes I find myself struggling with is to design a lesson plan that encourage diversity. Therefore, design a lesson plan which is very diverse. So I'm going to share my suggestions, but I would be more than happy to hear if I have some students or even teachers which are following the webinar. At the end, I think it would be interesting to share each other's techniques. So what does it mean to have a diverse lesson plan? First of all, as a teacher, I think it's important to include different topics that everyone can relate to. So topics not only that the teacher is interested, but do research what your students would be interested and what not only about interest, but also about what their culture might feel to connect with. Second of all, I think it's important to create lesson plans that connect with real world issues. Do encourage conversation about things happening all over the world. I know that it's very challenging as a teacher to mediate when people in the class have different political opinions or different values, different perspective, but do encourage conversation about real world issues. So I think it's very challenging, but it's very important to have opportunity to talk about what's happening in the world at the moment. Additionally, I think it's important for teachers to provide examples of relevant contributions coming from different people from different cultures. For example, if the topic of the class is science, you as a teacher might contribute with famous scientists or famous philosophers, people that contributed to that topic, not only from the country that you are designing the lesson of, but also people coming from different social and ethnic backgrounds. Also, as a final point, I think diverse lesson plans must include sources from a variety of material inspired by different cultures, books, articles, videos. For example, do not include books only from, if I am doing an English class, it's important to include materials that do not come from American and British background, but also from different researchers and different countries. So one of my favorite topic is freedom in the classroom. Diversity must go along with freedom. And personally, I want to be honest with you all, it's something that I struggle with. It's not always easy to be flexible and to allow freedom in the classroom, but it's something I think it's relevant to pay attention to. First of all, avoid a strict approach. In order to be cultural aware and in order to maintain multicultural awareness, you need to be flexible. You need to allow freedom. So, for example, if you have students that you notice they are struggling and you notice they require more time, do allow space, do allow time and freedom. So, in this way, they will connect and engage with the lesson more effectively. All of them are different, so they might need more time. Some of them are super fast. Do not despair. Allow freedom and it takes time for everybody to understand. So be flexible and do not be strict with people that are struggling or need more time. Additionally, I think it's important for teachers to be facilitators for healthy debate. For example, if you notice your students have different opinions and different approaches to a certain matter, do not censor them. Do not stop the conversation. Do not limit the communication. Do allow communication. Do allow exchange of perspective, but try to be constructive. Do allow them to exchange opinions in a constructive and healthy way. Additionally, I think it's important to expose students to diversity. Being aware that in the classroom, people can have different opinions and can have a different mentality to the matter. So expose them and always mediate. So it's important to notice that all of the previous points that I mentioned before are important to have a specific outcome for a successful class. So multiculturalism is important because it helps students to become better citizens in their environment. Back in the country, they will go back after your classes with awareness about diversity. Additionally, I think it's important to understand that multicultural awareness will encourage students to be empathetic towards one each other. If you expose them to diversity, they will empathize with diversity more. They will see the different background as an enrichment and not as a threat. Additionally, I think that multiculturalism avoids prejudice. If you expose your students to different perspectives, they will understand that prejudice it's something that everyone has, but it's important to overcome the prejudice in order to succeed in the classroom. Additionally, I think that another outcome of multicultural awareness is that it facilitates better understanding of the topic in class. If you expose them to intercultural communication, they will understand the topic better. Everything will be facilitated. I think it's also important because it will improve students' self confidence, open mindedness, and empowerment. If you make them feel seen, if you make them speak about their background and their different cultural background and diversity, they will become more self-confident. They will have exposed to a certain topic a little bit in a more easy way. They will be more open-minded because they know they live in a diverse world. So they will be open to diversity and they will feel empowered by it. This will also allow students to feel safe. If they understand the teacher is listening, if they understand the teacher is open, therefore the whole classroom will be open and they will feel safe to share their experiences and their thoughts. So, additionally, I think that multicultural awareness will also bring to students be prepared for diversity, not only in education, but in the working environment. Students might be in your classroom to improve their language skills, but after their studies, they will go in the working environment and they will face diversity. So the sooner, the better. And finally, I think another outcome of multicultural awareness is that it will help students to be prepared to solve problems. So the problem solving skills will be uh, kind of improved. They will be prepared to solve their problems in the future. So, as I mentioned before, I would be more than happy to share my teaching strategies. But after this slide, I would love to hear if somebody feels okay to share also your strategies. I think it would be nice to enrich one each other. So first of all, what I do in my classes is group discussions. Sometimes I split them in small groups, maybe 3, 4 people, and let them share whatever they feel it's important from their cultural background. So they will enrich each other's perspective. Something I do, it's also interview. Do allow students to go around the school or outside in their free time to interview people, to ask questions, to be curious is the key. I also think that role plays is such an interesting and curious and important tool to use in the class. Allow them to put themselves in somebody else's shoes. It's not only challenging, but it's also funny. My students have fun when they try to put themselves into another person's shoes because it allows being cultural aware and be curious towards one each other. I also think that show and tell are an interesting tool to use in the class to allow cultural diversity. To show, to work, for example, I this week I asked my students to prepare a small presentation about folklore in their countries. So they can prepare a presentation, they will do research about it and show to the whole class what they prepared. I think it's important for them to expose their cultures to the whole class. Another way that I use in class to encourage diversity and intercultural communication is debating. I think it's important for them to have time and space to expose them thoughts. And as a teacher, it's important to mediate among different perspective and different thoughts. And I think also group projects might be useful and such a important strategy to use in class because it allows collaboration, inclusion, engagement, and diversity. So if you have any question, I think now it would be a great time, or maybe you would like to contribute with your strategies or something you do in your classroom to encourage diversity. You can either speak or write in the chat. I would be more than happy to read your strategies. Okay, yes, I have some questions. Someone is asking how to deal with antisocial students, which is a wonderful question. Thank you, Azina. So if a student might isolate, what I personally do is first of all, be sensitive about it. Do not put pressure on the student. Maybe there is a specific reason why the student is not talking. So one of my strategies is during a break, during a moment that the spotlight is not on the student, I might ask few questions. Are you okay? Maybe they had a bad day, maybe they don't feel good. So I allow them time and space to stay by their own. But maybe I discover they would like to be engaged. They are just shy. So in that way, if they don't want to participate, I allow them to do an individual research. Or they might be interested into each other topics. So I pair them with someone that is doing something that they might interest them. That's what I do, at least. Someone else is asking about pronunciation. Yes, very interesting point. First of all, I am not, I don't come from an English speaking country. I am Italian. So I struggled in the past with my accent. But I do think that accents enrich the classroom. I do think that people coming from different countries have an accent, and I do encourage people to keep an accent. It's what make people special. Pronunciation, though, is something a little bit tricky. So what I keep reminding my students is that accents are okay, but pronunciation is something that we need to work in the classroom. So, for example, when I notice they don't understand each other because pronunciation is tricky, I repeat the words for them and I ask them to repeat, and they will feel more comfortable if the teacher repeat, and they would feel comfortable to repeat after me. Okay, I can see many people share these strategies, sharing images and texts related to different cultures. This is a great strategy, yes. And then asking the students to discuss and make association about it. Interesting. Thank you, Valdomiro. Yes, Abelardo. Realia, focusing on cultural background of regions is amazing for the students. I agree with that. Okay, debating is good. Movies is also a great tool. Thank you. Yes, and also class discussions. I agree with that. Sorry, I'm trying to read everyone's contributions, but you have written so many things. Global holiday. Yes, group discussions. It's very hard because depending on the age and the background of your students, you might organize group discussions in very different ways. It can be about age, it can be about their jobs. Yes. Sorry, I'm taking the time to read everyone's message. Yes, someone is asking, if you come from a different background, how do you deal with maybe the different ways they perceive conflict, which is a great question. Thank you, Catherine. So, for example, if a person is sharing their perspective about struggling with inclusion, maybe they think that as a woman, it's difficult to find their voice in their working environment, in their school, and maybe they come from a country that women don't have a voice. So for them, that's a conflict, that's an issue. Someone else coming from a completely different cultural background, they might not perceive that issue as an issue itself. So I think you as a teacher have the responsibility to mediate about what's a conflict and what's not, and try to allow them time and space to expose their experiences, even though some of them might not consider that as a conflict. Someone else is asking, how do you know which level can we apply all of this? Which is a great question. Thank you, um, John. John, I think. So, for example, group discussions is great for all levels, from the A level, B level, and C level. Obviously, the topic might differ. So, group discussions for A level can be something about real life, something they can relate to, like shopping, clothing, food. Group discussion for the B level, something that can encourage them to express opinions, because starting from B1, B2, they are able to share opinion and expresses different opinion. And C levels, obviously, it's more critical thinking, more debating, more political views. Okay, I'm trying to read all the questions that might be contributing to the webinar. Yes, Nastya is saying that it's important to take into consideration their preferences about working with one student or another. So if you do randomly assigned group division, sometimes your students might be put with someone who is in conflict with them. It's a very good point, Nastya. Thank you. So as a teacher, you must pay attention and acknowledge every student. If you notice some of them might struggle with one each other, you might put them with someone that would feel more comfortable. But remember, as a teacher, you must expose them to diversity and stepping out of the comfort zone. Sometimes it's good to challenge them. But it's very sensitive, so please be aware of your own students. Someone is asking if I can explain a little bit about debating. Of course, it's one of my favorite activity. At EF Dublin, we have spin classes, and one of them is debating, which I think is one of a great opportunity to expose students to critical thinking and cultural diversity. Debating is one of those activities that, as a teacher, you expose them to a topic. It can be a real life issue. It can be literally any topic. Today, for example, I asked them if school should be canceled if air pollution level is too high, for example. People either agree or disagree. So they discuss why they agree with each other, why they don't agree. So they come up with an argument, and you allow time to debate about the issue. You give a specific time, and then they debate, and then they do some research about their argument. I think it's great. Someone is sharing other strategies, games, videos. Yes, that's good. Food, music, sports, that's very interesting. You can also ask your students to share what's a special food from the country. It's good. So Sehar is asking, how can teachers differentiate instructions for students with diverse learning needs, especially in large classes? Very good question, Sehar. What I personally do, I try to give instructions that everybody could understand. First of all, I will try to be clear with my pronunciation. I would make clear. And I will ask questions at the end. I would ask if everybody understood. I would ask somebody to repeat the instructions just to make sure if they understood. And if they don't understand, try to find synonyms. Try to find something else to describe um, my activity. Sorry, I'm going very quick to read if you have any other questions. Alena is asking how to develop my own flexibility regarding cultural diversity. Yeah, it's a good question. In my opinion, what is important in order to develop flexibility is to let them speak. If you allow them space, they are going to teach you how to be flexible, how to be patient, how to be listening to something that might be uncomfortable. They are gonna literally explain to you which technique to use. Avoiding conflict, it's another important aspect. If you start realizing people might be having a conflict, try to validate their points, validate their feelings, and allow everybody to speak. If you notice someone else is taking over, do allow people in silence to have a word. Yes, also Lali says, make classroom atmosphere friendly, helpful, fun. Absolutely. Yes, also workshops are really, really interesting to allow them to do research. Storytelling. Aleida is asking, what could I do if students come with some stereotypical thinking of each other's cultures? Some families follow some rules and want their children to follow them. Thank you, Aleida. This is so important. If they come up in class with some stereotypes, as I said before, do validate what they're saying. Do not judge them immediately about what they're saying, but do allow a different perspective. For example, okay, student X, thank you for telling me your opinion. Might um might someone else share their views? If you don't agree with this person, would you like to share your opinion? Always ask if somebody else don't agree. I think it's important to allow people to contradict each other's opinion. Araceli, sorry, asks, how do you manage in your class when students are very afraid of participating, producing language at any level? This is a very good question. So if they are struggling to participate, do not force them. Never force a student to do something they don't want to do, but be flexible about it. Try to investigate why they don't want to participate, the reasons behind it. Did they have a bad day? Are they self-conscious? Are they just shy? After you understand the motive, the reason why they don't want to participate, try to investigate if you can try to find a group they might feel more comfortable to work with, or maybe they just prefer to work alone, which is also okay. Okay. So, what is questioning as a teaching technique? Eliza is asking. Um, I don't really understand this question. Maybe you can clarify that for me. And Dima is asking, how do you deal with students who do not have motivation? It's a good question, Dima. Thank you. I try to understand why they don't have motivation. Maybe they are just tired. Some teenagers go to sleep very late at night. Maybe they are just tired. Or maybe their lack of motivation comes from the fact that the topic is not interesting. I try to ask them why they don't find it interesting. As a teacher, I need to be flexible. If the topic I have chosen is not interesting, I have to give up and change the topic. That's also okay. Try to stay aware, try to stay open and diverse. Anderson is asking, how do you deal with students who are below average in their academic performance? I think it's important to allow them to change level when necessary. So For example, if they are struggling because the level is too high, they don't feel comfortable because they are struggling, I think you can wait and see that maybe you just need, as a teacher, to change activity, make it easier for them. Be flexible and adapt your activity to their needs. After you adapt, if they're still struggling with their performance, well, it's okay to change the level, I think. Atia is asking how to treat aggressive students. Well, yes, sometimes it happens. Some students might be too aggressive, too forward. I think as a teacher, it's important to understand when to put a limit, when to mediate. So maybe you can ask them to rephrase their sentence. Maybe you can say, I understand you feel angry. I understand you feel in that way. So do allow them to be angry, but aggression must be remodulated, I think. Okay, guys, thank you for your questions and thank you for your contribution. I would like to share one last point, and after that, if you have additional questions, please do ask me. So I would like to contribute a little bit more with my ideas about some activities you could do in the class to allow multicultural communication and awareness. After you apply those strategies, some interesting activities you could do, and somebody mentioned before. So thank you guys to have anticipated me. Holidays and celebration. This is something that I find extremely exciting to talk about because every culture, every ethnic groups can relate to. But I think it's also important to include everyone in the class. For example, Christmas is coming, which is great, but do remember some cultures do not celebrate Christmas. But this is not to exclude some groups. This is a great chance to ask people, what do you do around this time of the year in your country? Please talk about it. Please encourage conversation about different holidays and different celebrations. Music and art, it's something that I find interesting as well. So some activities related to music, some of them might be interested in folklore and artistic expressions from that specific ethnic groups. So this might be a good idea. Literature. So many countries have wonderful writers and authors. So do encourage your students to research about them. And they might be interested about literature as well. Folklore, you can structure some activities around folklore as well. Games from around the world. I think some people might not know board games or winter games, summer games. So do encourage that exchange. Yes, someone is saying identity icebreaker could be great at the beginning of the year. That's another nice game. Mirza is saying playing drama. Don't let me start. I love drama. I love theater. And if you, as a teacher, like drama as well, I think using your body and playing some techniques allow them to play theater. Sounds fun. Storytelling, allow them to do some research about specific stories and tell each other stories from that ethnic group, from their countries. They would be interested. Someone yeah, you're suggesting literary coffee. I don't know that, but I think it sounds fun. Pantomime, yes. Sorry, I get distracted with your strategies and activities because they are so much fun. All right, another activity that I find very fun and interesting is, for example, ethnic foods recipes. Everybody loves food. Everybody. Don't say you don't love it because everybody does. So I think food, it's so strongly related to each other's identity. So it might be interesting to just research about recipes. Um, all right, and I think multicultural fair could be an interesting activity as well. I want to point out that some of these activities do not suit every level. So, for example, holiday celebrations, it can be something suitable for more B1, B2 level. Music and arts, I think B1, B2, C levels are okay as well. But for example, food recipe is something that even A level can do. A1, A2, following simple recipe, simple instructions. It can be useful for their learning, but also it will help them to be exposed to diversity. Aida is asking, holiday celebration related to religion beliefs. How can we handle families who are not comfortable dealing with all the cultures and celebrations? And how not to allow their children to participate in these kind of activities? Thank you, Haida, for the question. I think it's important to respect each other' beliefs. So if you might be doing an activity related to the religious belief that a different person doesn't believe in, always ask if they are comfortable. If a family is not comfortable for their child to be exposed to that activity, it's okay. Do not force engagement. Ask them if there is another activity they would like to do. Ask them if they have another celebration from their own countries they would like to work on. Zaiberu, it's proposing to play Kahoot. Kahoot is a great game to include in your classes. Kahoot, it's a game platform that you can create multiple choices, activity, quizzes. Yeah. Yes, Sophia is pointing out that it's important not to force your students to respect them, and I do agree with that. Okay, guys, so these are my ideas. I know that I could talk for hours and hours about diversity in the classroom, but unfortunately, the webinar it's not eternal. So if you have any questions, we have around 10 minutes, and I would be more than happy to keep answering your questions. Okay, Laila is suggesting field trips can be good to understand the different cultures. Absolutely. What we do at EF here in Dublin, it's immersion challenges. We bring our students outside the classroom and we expose them to diversity. We could bring them into a museum or literally in a field, or they could bring them in a different city just to expose them to different perspective. People coming from Milan. Hi guys, I am from Milan. And I want to say thank you from people coming from countries that maybe it's daytime, morning, or even the night. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to share my thoughts because I know that being a teacher is very challenging, but it makes me feel hopeful when I see many people um, attending these webinars. Okay, guys, we are almost 700, so it's very difficult to follow all of your questions, but thank you for the enthusiasm. Would you like me to go in depth or just explain myself further on intercultural awareness? I will allow 5 more minutes. Okay, so someone is asking if I have any strategies to improve learning. Well, that's a very broad question. What I usually do to improve and facilitate their learning, if they if they might have different learning styles, is to adapt my activity. If I know some students learn better with audios and videos, I try to include videos in my class, and maybe half of the class I could do that, and other half of the class I could include more group discussion, more conversation. So always try to find a balance between the different learning styles. Be aware that people coming from different cultural backgrounds might have different rhythms, different ways of absorbing certain notions. Yes, picking activities. Remember that some people are shy to speak. So, yes, do encourage conversation, do encourage debate. But sometimes, if they are shy, do not push them. Maybe you can just allow them to listen. And maybe you can say in a debate, okay, you can be the jury, you can be the listening part, and then share your feedback at the end. This could be a good compromise. So, how can we treat the mistrust of others? Thank you for the question. Sometimes students might have prejudice and do not trust each other. It's very hard. The teacher must be the first one to acknowledge bias, cultural bias. So if you're flexible and if you're open, your students might trust each other a little bit more. And always ask them, why don't you trust this perspective? Would you like to share your perspective? Would you like to share your doubts? How do you deal with bullying? Yes, that's a good question. Sometimes prejudice can lead to bullying. I think it's important to understand where is the limit if you feel someone is not respecting another person. I think taking the time to individually speak with the person who is insulting is important. You have to point out that is bullying. You have to point out that is misrespect. So I would just take the time after the class to have a conversation with the person having prejudice and trying to understand why. And then next time they might change perspective. Anup says that in the classroom, he or she facilitates many students having aversion to speaking, but they are good listeners. Exactly. In that case, what do we do? If they are good listeners, assign them tasks that empowers the listening skills. So as I said before, they might be listening and maybe giving feedback later. What did you listen? What did you understand? What do you think about what you understood in the class? Thank you, guys. Thank you. Yes, I'm gonna switch on the light because it's becoming very dark here in Dublin. It's almost 5 p.m. As you can see, it's getting dark. Winter is coming. I have 5 more minutes if you would like to ask more questions. Thank you, guys. I know you come from different countries, Argentina and Azerbaijan, and it's amazing to see that you are all connected now. Saudi Arabia, wow. Thank you, guys. I really, really hope that that this webinar was useful. I have included my bibliography if you would like to take a screenshot. How do you make sure students feel safe while also pushing them outside their comfort zone? Very good question, Anna. Thank you. So what I personally do, it's going slow, step by step. Ask questions, understanding if they feel comfortable. From their feedback, you would understand how comfortable they are. For example, why are you not participating? Are you tired? Are you sad? Something is bothering you? If they give you a positive feedback, keep pushing them. If you feel they put a barrier in front of them, do not push anymore. Try to find a compromise. Sometimes multicultural awareness allows you to understand when to stop pushing because some barriers takes time to overcome. So what I think it's important, for example, is maybe students might not listen to you right in that moment, but they might listen to you the day after, the week after. Some cultures needs time to put at ease. It's also okay. How do you deal with political disagreement in the class? Thank you, Huda, for the question. Um, right now in the world, it's important to talk about politics. It's important to talk about different perspectives. When people don't agree with each other, I think it's important to validate different perspective, but ask them. It's important to request respect. So, okay, you don't agree with that political view. Why? Why you don't agree with one each other? And bear in mind, if they start disrespecting one each other, that's when the limit comes. That's in my perspective. How can I handle English class with French speakers students who don't really get English? I'm having troubles to help that student. Okay, John, I can relate. Here in Dublin, we have a huge number of French speaking students. They are trying to improve their English. So, what I find useful is to find synonyms. If they don't get a concept straight away, it's okay. I think it's completely normal. Find synonyms. If they don't understand with synonyms, use pictures, use body gestures, use your body to convey meaning. Do not use Google Translate with French because my French students translate in French and it's not helping them. Okay, guys, we are coming to an end. I have enjoyed so much, and I would like to thank you again. A massive thank you for everybody from all over the world who participated. If you have more questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And please, please do follow Teacher Zone for any updates and for the future webinars. I will personally take on webinar about young learners on the 5th of December. So maybe I will see you there, and have a great day, great night, great evening. Keep it up, stay diverse, stay multicultural aware, and I will see you around the globe. I will